If you take a look at those rating systems, the Sagarin and the FPI, here's what you'll find, and this is the staggering set of data that I was just referring to. The 4 teams ranked in the back end of the top 25 from the ACC are there fraudulently, Rev, fraudulently. You know how I know that? They're on average, not total, but on average, rated 16 3/4 spots higher in the committee poll than they are in the FPI. They're ranked on average 16 full spots higher in the committee rankings than they are in the Sagarin ratings. That is unfathomable how that can happen. Any statistician, any mathematician would throw those out as anomalies. You can't have that, and it points to a clear bias of influence in that committee room. It is very clear, and he's a great man and was a great coach, but Frank Beamer has the ear of that committee. There's no other way to put it. Virginia got beat by Indiana, for goodness sakes. Purdue beat Boston College. How in the world are these teams in the back end of the top 25? Meanwhile, the only Power 5 league, Rev, that actually had their teams that were ranked that were lower in the committee rankings than they are in the computer rankings is the Big Ten, on average by 3 1/4 spots. And that's not even taking into consideration the teams that weren't ranked at all, like Wisconsin, Michigan State, Purdue, and even Northwestern. By the way, those 3 that I first mentioned, Wisconsin, Purdue, and Michigan State, every single one of those teams, every one of them, all 3, are rated higher in both sets of computer ratings than any of the 4 ACC teams. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever why the committee would do that with the ACC. Plus, if you look at them just as a conference as a whole, they're 1-3 against the Big Ten and 3-9 against Power 5 leagues as a whole if you also include Notre Dame. That's the worst record amongst the Power 5 conferences of anybody. The Big Ten, along with the SEC, are the only 2 conferences with a winning record in Power 5 versus Power 5 situations if you also include Notre Dame. So none of it suggests that that should have happened at the back end of the ratings, and yet there they were, the committee once again giving us this stuff that is flawed logic, and the one that bore the brunt of it is the Big Ten Conference. No other conference had their teams on average lower in the committee rankings than they did in the computer other than the Big Ten.
Joel, there was the time when Barry Alvarez had the ear of the committee, and we were all very excited about that. So give us a committee of 1, your committee, by yourself, 1 through 4. 4 best teams in the country.
Well, yeah, see, I've seen Oklahoma several times, so they would be included in mine. I like Alabama and Clemson a lot. The way Clemson has played, and particularly of recent vintage in the last 3 ball games, has been dominant. I think Oklahoma and the way their offensive plays, averaging 8.9 yards per play, which would be a record in the FBS that would break Hawaii's record from years back. Their offense is absolutely staggering, and I think Notre Dame would obviously be in there. Those are the 4 best to me. Michigan's right on the outside of that. Michigan has every chance to jump in there, but the problem is, and Coach, this is where, if I was a Big Ten fan, if I was a Michigan fan, I would be a little bit nervous. What the committee is doing is chopping away at the resume of Michigan, right? I mean, you can see that in work. You've got Northwestern sitting there, a win for Michigan. Wisconsin sitting there, a win for Michigan. Michigan State sitting there, a win for Michigan. All unranked and should have been ranked over any of those 4 ACC teams that were there fraudulently, quite frankly.
And yet, to me, Joel, ultimately what matters in all of this is, do you get in or do you not get in? And we know what the path is for Michigan. They're going to have to win out in order to get in. The only scenario I can envision where they would win out and not get in would be were Alabama to lose this weekend to LSU, and then somehow you end up with an equation that includes Clemson, Notre Dame, and 2 SEC teams, even if Michigan wins out. I mean, to me, I understand what you're saying, and I certainly agree with your logic in terms of the Big Ten being underrepresented at the back end.
Don't allow the confirmation bias of the committee to influence what you think, too. And the committee does this as well. They're building in that excuse for Alabama as we speak. Again, you just have to open your eyes and look at this. The top-ranked undefeated team is an SEC team. The top-ranked 1-loss team is an SEC team by 2 spots. The top-ranked 2-loss team is an SEC team by 2 spots over an undefeated and a 1-loss West Virginia. The top-ranked 3-loss team in America is an SEC team. They build this in. I've been telling you guys this for years. A 13-person committee is one of the worst possible ways to rank 25 college football teams. The statistical variance of that equation is far too great. And anybody at a real academic institution that studies mathematics or statistics at all would tell you the exact same thing.
But again, I guess my point is, if Michigan wins out, they're almost certainly going to get in, correct?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we'll see. But you can't tell me that it doesn't matter. And the reason is because, remember, these resumes are like recipes, right? And so if I'm making gravy for turkey dinner, right, and I just change the entirety of the recipe, is it really the same gravy, Rev?
No, I hear what you're saying. I mean, look, I'm not disagreeing with you. I guess I'm just saying we sit here thinking about what's the Big Ten's path to the playoff, and it's Ohio State winning out or it's Michigan winning out. And if either one of those things happens, based on where they're positioned, certainly Michigan's got a great shot, and
No
Ohio
doubt.
State would have a good shot. Correct?
My whole point would be this. You're absolutely right. And I would think that Michigan in particular, because their loss would look so much better than almost anybody else's in the country. It would be the first week of the season with really just a bad first quarter to an undefeated team that's also in the playoff. But all I'm telling you is that why is the burden of proof on every other conference outside of the ACC and the SEC? I mean, does Alabama's schedule give them a pass?
No, of course not.
I mean, does Clemson's schedule give them a pass?
Absolutely
not. Well, now
not.
it does, because all of a sudden they're fraudulently built up by these teams from 19 to 25. So that's all I'm telling you, is that all of it matters. And I'm sick and tired of, in college football, the burden of proof being on everybody else outside of the Southeast. It's terrible for the sport. The burden of proof should be equal across all shoulders. The yoke should be even, if you will. That's all I suggest, which is why we need to increase the number of variables when ranking these college football teams. And you might be like, boy, he's really worked up for the first rankings. Does it really matter? Yes, it matters, because the recipe matters when you're making gravy on Thanksgiving.